below about 10,000 feet, normal breathing will provide adequate oxygen. Between 10,000 and 35,000 feet, a mixture of air and pure oxygen is necessary, and above 42,000 feet, pure oxygen under pressure has to be provided. You will recall that below 10,000 feet, known as the indifferent stage or zone, the body is not affected very much by the slight reduction in the partial pressure of oxygen, and many people in the world live happily up to a height of 12,000 feet without suffering hypoxia. But there may be some effects of living or flying at altitudes below 10,000 feet, such as an impairment of night vision. The rods and cones, which are the light-sensitive cells in the rear of the eye, require a great deal of oxygen, so any reduction will have a marked effect. There may also be a slight increase in heart rate and breathing, and new tasks may prove to be more difficult from about 10,000 feet. Between 10,000 feet and 15,000 feet, known as the compensatory stage or zone, the onset of hypoxia has more serious consequences. Some of the body's basic functions, such as heart rate and breathing, are able to compensate automatically for hypoxia by increasing the heart rate and breathing. This is known as the autonomic nervous system. However, the effects on the central nervous system increase imperceptibly. Judgment is impaired, short-term memory is lost at about 12,000 feet, tasks become more difficult, and without supplementary oxygen in this altitude band, crew and passengers may become drowsy. Because the hemoglobin, which is the component of the blood which carries oxygen, is becoming deoxygenated, fingertips and lips will start to turn blue or cyanosed, and there may be a strange tingling sensation, pins and needles, in the skin, or formication, rather like ants crawling over it. In the disturbance stage or zone, between 15,000 and 20,000 feet, the autonomic system cannot compensate, and the effects of hypoxia become more extreme, but still are imperceptible. Symptoms include euphoria, dizziness, headache, sleepiness, further loss of judgment and performance. Eyesight may become tunnelled. In the final critical stage or zone, above 20,000 feet, performance decreases dramatically, with disorientation, confusion, and ultimately severe cerebral hypoxia, brain damage, and death. To reduce the possible effects of hypoxia, one should not smoke, cabin heaters should be serviceable and not allow in fumes from the engine, and oxygen should be made available. A pressurized cabin will eliminate the risk completely, but then there is the risk of sudden decompression from high altitudes, which leads us to the next topic, namely time of useful consciousness if sudden decompression were to occur. As we have already seen, once one flies above 20,000 feet, the effects of a lack of oxygen on the brain are extreme, because the hemoglobin is only 65% saturated with oxygen. Following sudden decompression, for instance the loss of a window, there would, depending on altitude, be only a few seconds during which the pilot would remain at a level of consciousness where he could carry out effective actions. This is known as the time of useful consciousness. It is shorter than the time before he becomes unconscious. The times of useful consciousness at the different altitudes must be learnt, as they are frequent exam questions. Times of useful consciousness are affected by fitness, workload, smoking, obesity, and any factor which consumes oxygen in the body, and also the suddenness of the decompression. Study and learn these times. For example, during a progressive decompression, The time of useful consciousness, while engaged in moderate activity at 30,000 feet, is 45 seconds. Even shorter than the times of useful consciousness are the times of effective performance. But there are no times given for this because there are too many variables. However, at 40,000 feet, the time is about 5 seconds. One is only going to experience a lack of oxygen above 10,000 feet if a decompression occurs of a pressurized aircraft. Hyperventilation is a condition caused by overbreathing, or breathing too quickly. The cause is usually anxiety, stress or panic, perhaps because the sufferer believes he is inhaling too little oxygen, or the ambient temperature is too high, or he has motion sickness or whole body vibration due to turbulence. The effect of the excessive breathing is to exhale too much carbon dioxide, rather than to inhale too much oxygen. The body works effectively within a fairly narrow range of conditions, and it has systems to maintain this balance, or homeostasis. One of these systems is the carbonic acid content of the blood. With too little carbon dioxide, this acidity is reduced, and homeostasis is lost. The symptoms of hyperventilation, apart from the obvious distress state and fast breathing of the individual, are dizziness, tunnel vision, tingling in the hands and feet, and ultimately a stiffening of fingers and muscles. Hyperventilation is easily remedied by placing a paper bag over the mouth, which means that the exhaled carbon dioxide is breathed in again, thereby restoring the acidity balance. Calming the sufferer and slowing down his breathing would quickly end the symptoms. If a sufferer were to pass out, the body's autonomic system would soon restore the normal breathing pattern, and the sufferer's breathing would return to normal. It is of some importance that air crew and cabin crew know how to determine whether a person is suffering from hypoxia or hyperventilation. The symptoms are similar, and a hypoxic person may well start to breathe quickly. The safe course of action above 10,000 feet is to assume that the person is suffering from the more serious of the two conditions, that is, hypoxia. Below 10,000 feet, hyperventilation may be assumed. This ends our study on respiration.